All right, for today's explainer, we are jumping straight into Itumeleng Makale's book, Black Psychology. And look, this isn't just some light critique of mainstream psychology. No, this book frames it as an actual weapon in a race war and calls for something completely different, a totally separate African-centered way of understanding the mind.
So, to really get what this book is about, we have to start with a really heavy concept right at its core: menticide. Now, what is that? Well, this isn't just about psychological harm or feeling bad. According to the definition the author uses from Bobby E. Wright, we're talking about a deliberate, systematic war waged on the mind of an entire group of people. And the goal? Their ultimate destruction.
Okay, so here's how we're going to break this down. We're going to follow the book's argument through 5 key stages. First up, the diagnosis of the problem. Then we'll get into the prescription. After that, we'll dig into the very foundation of this new worldview, how it redefines the self. Then we'll look at the toolkit for making this change happen. And all of this, you'll see, leads to one final powerful goal: revolution.
All right, section 1, the diagnosis. The book kicks things off with a really stark claim. It says the crisis facing the African psyche is something it calls racist epistemic violence. What does that mean? Well, it's this idea that mainstream psychology isn't neutral. It's not just a benign science. It's presented as an active weapon being used in a cultural war.
So, the whole idea that psychology is universal, the author basically throws that right out the window. The argument here is that what we call psychology is actually completely culture-specific. It's built on a European experience, a European worldview. And so, the book argues, when you try to pass that off as a science for everyone, everywhere, well, that's seen as an act of Euro-hegemonic dominance.
And this is where the book really flips the script on mental health. It says that menticide, it's not a personal problem. It's not a personal failing. It's a politically caused condition. It's positioned as the direct result of this mental warfare, and it leads to what's called a disoriented consciousness. Think of it like a state of confusion and dependency on the very systems that are causing all the damage in the first place.
So if that's the diagnosis, this European-centered worldview causing the problem, then what's the prescription? Well, the book argues for nothing less than a complete paradigm shift. It's about embracing a totally African-centered worldview and learning to see the world through an indigenous African prism.
Now, in this framework, African-centeredness isn't just some abstract idea you think about. It's described as a total state of being. It's about having the clarity to define what it means to be African, but from an African perspective. Using your own frameworks to understand reality, completely free from any kind of outside lens.
And the author makes a really important distinction here, something they're very clear about. It's the difference between African-centricness and Afrocentricity. The book critiques Afrocentricity as more of an academic exercise, something that's maybe looking for outside validation and is trying to feed ideas into the African. African-centeredness, on the other hand, is presented as an internal state of being, a way of seeing the world that comes from the African, from the inside out.
So where do you even start with a shift that big? Well, according to the book, you have to go right to the foundation, redefining the very concept of the self. And this is where it makes a really radical break. It draws a line in the sand between the African concept of Ubuntu or Motho and the Western concept of human.
Yeah, this single sentence is pretty much central to the entire argument. The point here is that this isn't just a translation issue, human in a different language. The author's arguing that these are two fundamentally different concepts of what it means to be, and they're rooted in completely different ways of understanding life and existence itself.
So what is Ubuntu or Motho, according to this definition? It's a self-aware being of uprightness and wholeness, considered the highest form of life. But here's the really critical part that's different. This idea isn't just about the people who are alive right now. It actually includes the ancestors, the dead. They're seen as a vital, active part of the community, helping to maintain the sanity and order of the entire social world.
And wow, when you look at the composition of Ubuntu/Motho, it is incredibly complex. It goes way beyond the simple Western mind-body split. You've got the physical body, sure, but then there's Moya or life force, Semelo, which is described as spiritochemistry, and even Maikutlo, a vibrational connector to other people and things. It just paints this picture of a completely holistic being, deeply plugged into the world, both the parts you can see and the parts you can't.
Okay, so if that's the foundation, this whole new way of seeing the self, what are the tools you use to actually build on it? The book points to 2 main things: language and spirituality. These are presented as the keys to accessing and practicing this African-centered worldview.
And this quote really gets to the heart of how the book sees language. Words aren't just
labels for things. They're literally doorways to entire concepts. The idea is that indigenous African languages are like living libraries, holding the original blueprints for a whole way of seeing reality. So if you lose the words, you don't just lose a way to talk, you lose the entire world that those words describe.
The second tool is spirituality. But, and this is crucial, it's not spirituality as something separate from the mind, like a side dish. In this framework, psychology is spirituality. The book actually defines African psychology as a branch of African spiritual cosmology. It's one big, holistic system that completely rejects that Western idea of separating the mind, the body, and the soul.
So what's the actual process for healing and well-being? It's a concept from ancient Kemet called saku, and it's not described as therapy in the way we might think of it. It's a spiritual and communal practice. It's about building a person's character or illuminating their spirit. And interestingly, the book presents this as a skill that everyone in the community is supposed to have, not just some specialized expert.
So where is all this going? You might think it's all about individual well-being, right? This psychological recentering. But for the author, that's just the beginning. It's the absolutely necessary foundation for the final, ultimate goal: revolution. The connection the author makes is incredibly direct. Power is a function of culture. And the logic goes like this. If you're alienated from your own culture, you become powerless. So it follows that reclaiming that culture, recentering your very self in an African worldview, that becomes the ultimate act of reclaiming power. And let me be clear, the book is absolutely unambiguous about this. The goal is not reform. It's not about trying to tweak or integrate with the current system. The Sesotho word the author uses is petoho, and it means revolution in its most total sense, to overturn, to abrogate, to completely destroy the oppressive system.
Now, to make this huge abstract idea a little more concrete, the author brings in a traditional Basotho folktale. It's the story of a hero named Moshanyana Wasankiltane, who has to go up against this massive, all-devouring beast. And this story is used as a powerful metaphor for the struggle against white supremacy.
And the imagery here is, well, it's incredibly visceral. The hero has to kill the beast, cut open its belly, and deliver the people who have been swallowed and trapped inside. This is presented as a direct metaphor for what the author says is required, a direct head-on confrontation to dismantle the oppressive system from the inside out, to liberate your people and lead them back to their true, authentic selves. And all of this really leaves us with one big final question, which I think gets to the absolute core of the book's thesis. According to this framework, how does redefining psychology itself change the path to liberation? The argument, when you boil it all down, is that the fight isn't just political or economic. It suggests that the first, and maybe the most important battleground, is the mind itself.